I'm a female and this happened in 2008 when I was 13 years old. I'm now 27. I remember it like it was yesterday. I lived in Cincinnati at the time and it was January. My middle school was called off due to a snowstorm the night before. I was home alone because my dad and stepmom had to go to work, which meant my little sister was at daycare and my older brother had a dentist appointment. My dad worked for lawn care and sometimes came home for lunch if he was in the area, so when I was awoken by noises coming from the basement, I thought it was just him home from lunch, going through things in the basement, so I really didn't think anything of it. When I got out of bed, I could still hear what I thought was my dad in the basement, but as I approached the stairs something felt extremely off. I really don't know what caused me to do this, but instead of yelling, I whispered, "Dad, is that you?" He didn't respond, so I quietly went to the front door and looked out at the tiny square window and saw two men walking up the snow-covered hill to my backyard. I found out later that there was a third man, and he was the one who broke the basement window. I quickly realized that the noises I heard was actually the basement window directly under my bed in the basement being broken. I ran to my bedroom, immediately hopped into my closet, and called my mom. When she answered and I told her what was happening, she called my brother to see if he would go home because I had a history of being scared to be home alone, so neither of them actually believed that there were people in the house before my brother got there. And right after I got off the phone with my mom, I called 911. I don't think the dispatcher believed me at first because she asked me several times if I was sure there were people trying to enter my house. Meanwhile, the three men had already entered the house and were hauling ass up the basement stairs. After I told her that, I immediately noticed a change in her voice, and she told me to stay calm and asked me if I was in a safe place to which I told her I was in my bedroom closet, except the door wouldn't close all the way because, as most teenagers, my room was only clean because I threw a lot of it in my closet, so I had to hold my closet door shut. The dispatcher told me to let her know what I could hear, if anything. I told her that I heard them talking to each other in the living room, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. The next thing I knew, they were breaking down my dad and stepmom's bedroom door that was right next to my room. Not long after that, I see through the crack of my closet door one of the men enter my room, and a few seconds later he walked back out, obviously realizing it was a child's bedroom and that he wasn't going to find anything worthwhile in there. A few moments later, one of the men shouts, he's home," and they all started running away. Or so I thought. A bit of backstory about the house: it was fairly old, so to open all of the windows, even the basement, you had to crack a lever to open or close them, unlike the glass block windows that can't be broken or seen through. Not only that, but the front door didn't open because the house had settled too much and wouldn't unlock, so the couch was in front of it because the front door didn't work. We used the side door to get in and out. I'm not sure why, but the side door had to be unlocked with a key from the inside of the house to be able to leave. Everybody had a key besides my little sister. That being said, the men had to leave the way they entered with everything they were trying to steal, which was through the basement window. After the dispatcher informed me that the police had my house surrounded and it was safe to come out, it took me quite a while to leave my closet because I didn't truly know if they were gone. When I finally got the balls to get out, I grabbed my key and darted to the side door to let the police inside. I didn't see my brother anywhere, so I didn't know if something had happened to him or if it was even him who came. Not long after I left the police inside, my brother came walking inside the dining room. I jumped up so fast and gave him the biggest hug I'd ever given him. When the police asked us to tell them what happened, I heard my brother tell them that when he got to the house, he walked up to the side door like he normally would, and when he was about to unlock it, he was met with one of the men through the window. He said the man cocked his gun, put it up to the glass, and said, "Hey, After that, he said he froze up, and then when he could finally feel his legs again, he ran up the street and started knocking on doors. After about 3 houses, he knocked on the 4th, and a little girl answered. He asked her to go get her mom. He told her that there were men inside of our house, and his little sister was inside. She called the police, and my brother then called our grandparents to let them know that I was telling the truth. I asked the officers if they caught the man, and he assured me that they did. A little while later, a police car pulled up to the front of my house, and they had one of the men stand outside of it for my brother to identify the one who pulled the gun out on him. I was so happy that they were all caught and that we were safe. My grandparents and my mom got there around the same time, and I just remembered them all rushing up to hug me. My mom then called my dad, who rushed home, and my stepmom wasn't too far behind him. Understandably, my dad let me go with my mom and stay at her house for a few days, and I also didn't go to school. The township reached out to my dad and invited us to come to the town center about a week after the break-in. When we got there, I was surrounded by the ICE officers who were there that day and apprehended the men, and they awarded me with a certificate of bravery for staying calm and helping them catch the men, along with a little gift bag of girly items. About a month later, we had to go to the men's court date, where we met a woman and her son in the waiting area that had their house broken into a week before our house got broken into by the same man, who just so happened to steal one of the guns she had. As it turned out, the two men had 3 guns, but only one of them was loaded. I was way too overwhelmed to be in the courtroom and have to see the men again, so the judge allowed us to stay in the waiting area until their hearing was over. 2 of the men ended up getting 7 years in prison, and the other got 12 years in prison because he pulled a gun on my brother. They're all out of prison now, and for a little while I was scared that they would come back once they got out, because my dad still lives there, but nothing has happened since that day. I've always heard stories about houses being broken into, but I never thought it would happen to me. I'm really glad that I was old enough to know what to do in that situation, and that the men never knew I was in the house with them until they were in court, because who knows what they would have done if they knew. This just happened last night. I live alone with 2 cats, the typical Redditor. This is one of those definitely mundane sounding but so creepy in real life things. I don't scare easily, for what it's worth. Anyway, there's a cat door in my rear slider. The slider faces the woods behind my condo. The cats get supervised outside time, and I use a little nanny cam to check that they're checking in regularly and that kind of thing. I can watch it from my computer or phone while doing stuff. I also occasionally get neighbors' cats who come in for a bite to eat. My male cat loves it. My female cat hates it. Anyway, this one gray cat comes around every few days, comes in, has a snack. I scoot him out and it's no big deal. Well, he'd been coming around really late at night and pawing at the locked cat door. It scared me at first because it was a terrifying sound to hear in the middle of the night. I was able to figure this one out pretty easily just by listening. My cats would run to the rear slider. My female cat would hiss, the male would meow, and then I would hear something scamper away. Easy neighbor cat came for a midnight visit and couldn't get in anyway. My nanny cam has automatic night vision, which turns on when it's too dark. I had the cats in last night. The cat door was locked shut. The patio light outside of the slider was turned off, and I was getting into bed. Just as I gotten under the covers, I heard the scratching, rattling sound at the locked cat door. I opened the app and definitely did not see a cat. It didn't help that the night vision makes everything look super creepy, but regardless, I was freaked the out. There was a scraggly looking person hunched over on my patio playing with the locked cat door. My female cat hissed and he got up and left. I guess it could have been a she. I never saw a face, and I only cut a few frames while my blood ran cold. It looked like they were wearing a loose t-shirt. I called the cops and they had a cruiser nearby. He did a drive-through and walked the area out back. It was late, so I didn't give a statement or even meet with the officer, but I did see his flashlight as he walked the tree line, although it doesn't seem like it. This happened quite a while back, probably over 10 years ago. I was in the later years of high school and was home alone. My parents were at a wedding that required them to stay at a hotel, and my brother worked the night shift at that time. My family lived in a very well-known East Coast city in a blue-car neighborhood that was starting to take a nosedive. As a teenager, I was a bit of a loner. I wasn't a nerd or anything. I was a big guy who had friends and went on dates, but I'm a natural introvert, so I cherish the rare alone time that I got this weekend. I was looking forward to engaging in my normal empty house routine: play some PlayStation on the big screen TV, then order a late takeout dinner, pizza or Chinese, and pig out while watching some Dragon Ball Z. Then around 2 a.m. fall asleep on the couch with my old dog Cecil. Cecil was a beagle who was as old as the hills and had been in our family for about 8 years. He was quiet and peaceful and spent his time begging for food and sleeping. Unlike most beagles, Cecil never howled or barked. He was more than content to rest his head on your lap and spend the night there. Anyway, back to the story. It's approximately 1 a.m. I just finished the last slice of pizza and was dozing off on the couch when I hear a bang coming from the back alleyway. I didn't think much of it. Anyone who has Lived in a city, knows noises happen at all moments of the night. Cecil's head pops up off my lap, and the hair on his back stood up. He was always a bit skittish, so I calmed him down and started dozing off again. Not more than 2 minutes later I hear another bang, and Cecil did something I'd never seen him do before. He leapt off the couch and ran like the wind towards the door leading to the basement, barking and growling like a dog twice his size. The look on his face reminded me of a German Shepherd K9 unit. I'd never seen him like that before, which got my adrenaline pumping. Through the dark barking, I can now make out a persistent banging. There was a seldom used door in the basement that led out to our back alleyway. It was old and rusted and was hard to open even with a key, and it made a lot of noise. I suddenly realized that someone was trying to break into my house through my basement door. For a quick bit of context, for anyone who hasn't lived in a bad neighborhood, if someone tries to get into your house and moves on after they realize the door is locked, they want your stuff. If someone is persistently trying to get into your house despite the door being locked, well, they want you. Knowing this, I rush upstairs to grab the heavy wood baseball bat that I keep under my bed for situations like this. Then I hit down to my basement. I probably should have ran, but I was a macho teenager with a tough guy complex, and I also didn't have anywhere to go. While I'm heading down the stairs to my basement, Cecil blows past me with the speed and aggression of a dog half his age. Suddenly, I hear a man's voice say, "Oh, and the banging stopped. I did call the cops or anyone else, which was probably the dumbest thing I've ever done. I just sat up for the rest of the night with a bat in hand. My brother came home that morning, and I told him what had happened. We went to the basement door to take a look, and when we gave it a tug to open it, the whole door fell off. This psycho was one good shove away from getting into my house, but old Cecil scared him off. But I'm pretty sure that lazy fat old dog saved my life. When I tell this story to people, they dismiss his actions as a dog doing what a dog was supposed to do. But when I tell you that Cecil never barked or moved that fast in his life, you can take that to the bank. It was almost like he knew the urgency, like he knew that door was going to give. A few years back we had to have him put down because he just had no will to live anymore. Before the injection, I got a moment alone with him. I thanked him one last time for his friendship and for what he did that night. At this point I was a grown man with a wife and kids. I'm convinced that none of that would have happened without old Sil. Thanks, pal. I miss you. Me and my cousin Pat were left at our family's lake house while our families went out to eat. The house was truly beautiful, but the only problem was how dark it could get. So dark you couldn't even see outside if the balcony lights weren't on, because it was pretty secluded. We had no need to turn on any outside lights, only the one at the front door. We were just having fun and singing to our heart's content. When I went to take a break and grab water, all of a sudden I heard 3 taps that sounded like they were coming from the balcony windows. The windows go top to bottom, so it almost looks like a wall of windows, but it was still pitch black. Pat must have heard it too as he stopped singing, and we were both staring in silence at the windows. After a few seconds of being frozen in fear, I ran and turned on the lights to find no one there. We calmed down after a couple of minutes and chopped it up to the wind or a stick, just anything rational. Then after a couple of minutes there were 3 taps on the door. Pat and I darted to his room and locked the door, trying to be as quiet as possible, frantically texting his uncle to check the cameras. He did, and he saw no one there. We then heard the floorboards very quietly creaking inside, and Pat was on the verge of tears as I quietly slid off the bed and pressed the weight of my body on his locked door. We begged our family members to come back, and when they did, they just made fun of us for being rational, but we knew what we heard. To this day, Pat and I never stay in that house alone. I'm a security guard for an alarm response company. We answer alarms for businesses and private residences 99% of the time. It's a motion detector set off by a cat, or a restaurant forgot to disarm their stuff before the stock truck arrived to unload. In this case, I was called out to a house where the back door alarm was set off. I thought someone opened it. The owner was out of town, but she was alerted by her app and had her mother meet me there. We checked the door. It's locked. We figure maybe someone tried the door, but it didn't budge, setting off the alarm. But there's a light on inside. The mother mentions this to the daughter on the phone. The daughter says she isn't sure if she left the light on or not. It's a good idea to make people think someone's home, but she just isn't sure. That gave me a bad tingle. The mother wanted to go inside to check, however, she didn't have a spare Key the neighbor did, but they were asleep, and the mother didn't want to wake them, so I fill out my papers and go. Back to my normal patrol routes. An hour later, the same house sends an alert out. I'm the only one in my city zone, so I answer it again when I pull up police. And CSI are there talking to the mother and the now awake neighbor. They reviewing the video footage sent to them by the daughter. I look at the footage. 4 armed men wearing masks and hoodies came out of the bathroom a minute after the mother and I left. They proceeded to rob the place they'd broken in and locked the door behind them for appearances. They're the ones who turned on the light, the mother told me. 3 guys had robbed her daughter's home a month before. Somehow they knew when this girl would be out of town. They appeared smart, desiring a quiet robbery without conflict, but they brought guns, so they were prepared to shoot their way out of trouble if need be. The mother had wanted to go in. If she'd had a key or woken the neighbor for a key, we would likely have been shot dead by these guys. When we went inside, work doesn't give me Kevlar vests or anything. If I ever get another house call and someone is there, I'm not going inside no matter what is asked of me. I count myself fortunate the way was blocked this time because I was prepared to foolishly go in and check if I could. The 1% of calls where something is actually off. It has never been as bad as this one. This happened back in the 80s, so very much the pre-cell phone era. I was in high school at the time. One night after dinner, my mom suggested we take a walk around the block to walk off dinner. My brother and dad were watching TV and opted to stay home, so it was just us girls. We lived out in the fringes of the suburbs in a subdivision that was semi-rural. By that I mean there were houses, but no streetlights or sidewalks. Everyone had septic tanks as there was no sewer service and that kind of thing. The houses were all well back from the road, and the lots were wooded. Anyway, we were walking around the block, which is about 1.5 m in total, and we're almost back home. It's pitch black that night. There was no moon, and we had a flashlight to use as needed. Without it, you couldn't see much past a foot or two around you. We mainly used it as a signal if a car went by, but there wasn't really anyone around, so we had it switched off, and we're just walking and chatting. Just as we turned the corner onto our street, we suddenly heard footsteps behind us. This was a bit weird as we just come from that way and hadn't seen or heard anyone walking on that street or coming down the driveways we passed, but we just figured it was some neighbor also out for a walk, and we hadn't noticed them in the dark, so I turned around to look and switched the flashlight on to see who it was. They immediately switched a flashlight on too, so I could only see their light and not them. They said nothing. We kept walking, but the footsteps behind us sped up. Now they sounded heavy, so we thought it was a man. We sped up. He sped up. I turned the flashlight back on, and he turned his on again. In silence, we were too scared to call out, and now we were approaching our driveway. As we got there, I pushed my mom and front and told her to get up the driveway, which was steep and long. Once she had a start, I sprinted up after her. As I did, the footsteps veered away to the other side of the road and kept going. Nothing was ever said by this person, and normally people here wave and spoke when out walking or even driving by. When we got up to the house, my dad said it was probably just a neighbor, so my brother and I got into my car and drove down the road to see who it was. No one was there. We went all around the roads, and no one was walking on them. There wasn't time for him to leave the area. Either it was a nasty neighbor getting off on scaring us and then ducking into a house, or whatever it was came out of the woods behind us and then disappeared back into them. So about 12 years ago, I was 9 years old. I was home alone with my 12-year-old brother. We were supposed to go to my aunt's house to have lunch and wait for my mother there. We got up at 10:30 a.m. I took a shower, then my brother did. After that, we were both in the bathroom brushing our teeth and finishing up when we heard someone knock on our door. Since every time someone knocked at our door, they turned out to be a salesman or Jehovah's Witness, we kind of waited for them to go away. After a couple of minutes, I went to see if they were still outside through the window, and no one was there. What a relief. We continued getting ready when we saw a shadow go by through the bathroom window, which was kind of like a small square of frosted glass. We waited and watched just in case it was a bird flying by. When a hand hit it clear as day, we got scared. We didn't know what to do. My brother had his cell phone, so we immediately called the police. While it was ringing, we heard a loud bang at the door. Someone was brute forcing it. I don't know if they were kicking or ramming it, but he was one of the most frightening things I've ever heard. My brother told me to lock the bathroom door, so I did. They took 5 banks before the perpetrator finally bashed the door open. The police answered. I remember the exact thing my brother said. He was whispering. His voice could be barely heard. Hello, there's someone in our house. I think they're stealing. Then a pause. We're at 1249 Maple Street. Another pause. I'm with my little brother locked in our bathroom. Please hurry. While all that I was sitting against the wall hugging my knees. It was one of the most nerve-wracking experiences ever. I could hear the man going through all of our stuff, emptying STS, going up and down the stairs, opening cabinets. He even broke a few cups and plates. Then I heard the sound my cell phone does when it turns off, and I remembered leaving it on the kitchen table. I felt so stupid for leaving it there. Things continued for a couple of minutes when we heard him trying to open the door to the bathroom. My brother got a hold of a big metal rod we had lying around there. The man started kicking the door. Who's there? The man screamed. We said nothing. Another kick, then another. I felt I was about to have an anxiety attack. My chest started to ache. I had chills. It was really hot. I tried to remain calm, but it was just too much. After that, he stopped. We heard the door opening and then silence. We waited for almost 10 minutes before going out of the bathroom. The living room was a total mess. Lots of papers and books on the floor. The cabinets were open, cups and plates on the floor. And our mother's bedroom, the nightstand and the closet were open. Everything inside them was all over the place. Upstairs in our room, it was the same thing. In about 5 minutes, the man was able to go through everything we had and left a total mess. After that, my brother called my mom and she ordered us to go to my aunt's ASAP, so we did. When we got there, I was a little more relaxed. My aunt was waiting with us with ice cream, probably because my mom had told her everything and she wanted to calm us down a bit. We got back home at about 5 o'clock. My mom told her boss she had a home emergency, so she left early. She tidied up the house, cleaned up, and left everything the way it was before so we could be relaxed. I really appreciate her effort and my aunt's to calm us down and do everything so we didn't have to think about it. According to my mom, the police got to our house after she arrived at about 3-4 hours after the incident. She explained everything, but because of a lack of evidence, nothing could be done. The man was never caught, and honestly, I don't think they even tried to search for him. The next few days, my mom was home with us. Now, I tell the story as a funny anecdote. Luckily, no one was hurt, and he only took useless stuff, but at the time I was really scared. To a 9-year-old, an experience like that can have serious repercussions. I'm lucky it never came to that, and I got over that after a couple of weeks. So yeah, that is my story. I was living with my male roommate at the time. It was the middle of the night in the stickiest, hottest part of a particularly sticky, hot southern summer. I decided to sleep on the couch in the living room because there was a window unit AC in there and my room didn't have one. I was sound asleep when I hear the door slam open and in walks a middle-aged man, obviously intoxicated. I scream at him that he doesn't live here and keep yelling at the top of my lungs for my roommate. The man mutters that he was just looking for something to drink and runs off before someone asks. I hadn't checked the door to make sure it was locked because we never unlocked that door. It was surely checked every night thereafter. This might not be as creepy as some stories on here, but it still gives me the chills to this day. This happened pretty much an hour ago. I was pulling up to my house with my mom when she says, "Who is at our house?" Me, being confused, looks at our yard. Then I see someone walking up to us. My mom said he was trying to open the door and get in. Hey, I just lost my job. I was looking for somewhere to work. Could you help? The guy asks. I can't remember what my mom said, but it was basically no because of what he's about to ask. Could you spare a couple of dollars? He asks. Sure, if you want to come to this side, I can give you a couple of bucks. My mom says thank you. He replied. My mom gives him some money. They then start to talk about how he should take it as a blessing and to pass it to someone else. He says my mom is an angel. Then they start to talk about other things I can't remember. Then the man disappears. My mom starts to drive around to find the man to make sure he's left, as she understandably doesn't feel safe getting out. We start to drive around. She calls her boyfriend and my dad. Then there's a cop car on the side of the road. Hey, there was a middle-aged man on my doorstep with a screen door open. Then he walked up to my car and asked for work this late at night, which I found suspicious. He asked for money and I gave him some. My mom told the cop, "Where do you live?" The cop replied, "My mom told him And the cops said they'd follow. We drive back home with the cop following. He inspects the front and backyard, but there's no one. We decided safe to go back in. It talked to my mom about it, and she said he could have just been drunk and at the wrong house since it was St. Patrick's Day and that people like to get drunk on that day, but I highly doubt that. I find it weird that as soon as he saw us pulling up, he came to our car with a story. Take this information as you will. Though this encounter happened when I was about 10 years old, my sister and I were home alone since it was during the summer, but our mom and grandmother were busy so they couldn't stay home with us. We were used to being home alone during the summer, so it wasn't a big deal. The only thing we could not do was go outside or open the door if someone knocked. During this day, I had gotten up and started to play The Sims 2 in our kitchen. My sister was watching TV in our den. A few hours into gaming, I thought I heard the doorbell ring. At first I thought it was my game, but I turned off the sound, so I asked my sister if she heard the doorbell. She replied that she hadn't. She said it was probably just the show she was watching. I brushed it off and went back to playing my game. About 10 minutes later, I see a reflection on my computer of a man in a suit, his hands queued around his eyes, looking through the glass doors behind me. I turn around to be face to face with this strange man I'd never seen before. I had no idea how long you'd been watching me. He waved at me like he knew me from somewhere. I called my sister's name, who had not noticed the man yet. She grabs the house phone quickly, calling our grandmother. Now we had seen Celise before. None of them looked like this guy. He was wearing a full-on black suit that did not fit him. If not strange enough that this guy was wearing a suit in 99 degrees, he was also carrying a briefcase. All the salespeople I'd seen only ever had a clipboard or maybe a couple of flyers, but this man had a briefcase. The next flag that came with this guy, he walked around our house to come to the back door, which during his little trip he would have seen there wasn't a car in the driveway, indicating no one was home. As I was getting up to hide, the man reached down and grabbed the door knob. He started to jiggle it forcefully. Thankfully, the door was locked. He looks at me, smiling, gestured at me to come unlock the door for him. All the noise he'd been making had now set off our 75 pounds lab mix, making her go bats hit crazy. No way she was going to let this guy get to us if he did get in. My sister tells me our grandmother is on the way, and she wanted us to hide in the back of the house in her room until she could get home. My sister hands me the phone, then runs into the kitchen to grab the biggest knife we have. I can hear her yelling at the guy that we called the cops. She comes back into the room with me, and we shut the door. She tells me after she lied to the guy about calling the cops, she said that he started laughing like she just told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. A little while later, we heard the door open and my grandmother calling us. We come out to meet her. She tells us she did not see a man anywhere in sight. She'd walked around the whole house before unlocking the door. She also thought it was weird. If he was a salesperson, he would have left a note saying, "Sorry, we missed you." She ended up taking the rest of the day off to stay with us, also so she could watch to see if the man would come back around. It's been 11 years since this encounter, and I still don't want to know what was in his briefcase. This took place when I was 14. I just started 8th grade. I grew up in Southeast Texas, and as I'm sure many of you all know, fall is still very much part of hurricane season. It was a Friday night, and it was just me and my mom at home. My dad was out of town for work. I originally had plans to go spend the night at a friend's house, but there was a tropical storm coming, and my mom decided last minute that she would rather have me at home that night. I was pissed. Tropical storms weren't normally looked at too seriously. I honestly felt like she was overreacting. Of course, this was my I'm 14 in grown-up mentality at work here. My mom did feel bad, and so we rented a bunch of movies and ordered a pizza and got a bunch of ice cream for a great night. In my parents' bedroom was on the opposite end of the house from mine. This is important for later. We lived in a split-level house. The house I grew up in was built in 1950, and it was a postmodern style. Think Frank Lloyd Wright. The entire back of the house was all floored to ceiling windows. Think of just a huge wall of glass. The whole house was an open floor plan, so the kitchen was the first defined room with walls on the first floor, and my bedroom was directly off of the kitchen, while my parents' room was at the top of the stairs. She'd gone to bed around 10 p.m., and I went to my room to watch 2 movies that I'd rented just for myself. The storm was really starting to kick into high gear. The wind was picking up, and it was raining sideways. I was in the middle of watching The New Guy, and I still remember looking at my clock, and it said 12:53 a.m. I was getting tired. and could feel my eyes getting heavy with the weather so bad. I remember thinking that maybe it wasn't so bad I had to miss the sleepover. I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember is a huge crash. It was one of the big windows in either the dining room or living room. Our neighborhood was in a really wooded area, and I thought a tree or branch had fallen in the storm, and it broke in one of the windows. I left my room and went out through the kitchen. Right as I was approaching the doorway from the kitchen to the dining room, I could see my mom coming down the stairs. I saw a man standing in our dining room covered in broken glass and blood. Due to where he was standing, I couldn't get to my mom. He was young, early 20s, and he was soaking wet and had no shoes on. He had literally run through our window. He was bleeding all over, had glass sticking out of him, and was standing barefoot in a bunch of broken glass. It took him a second to register both me and my mom. But when he did, he immediately launched into an explanation of how he was being chased by someone who wanted to kill him, and that we needed to call the cops. My still fairly innocent 14-year-old brain didn't doubt this at all, but my mom was eyeing him suspiciously. We move into the kitchen, and my mom grabs her purse and my arm to keep me close. I'd grabbed a kitchen to try and help us. Bleeding, my mom pulls out her cell phone and starts calling our neighborhood patrol. I noticed this, and so on our landline I call 911. We both finished our calls, and now we were just waiting. The guy couldn't sit still and kept getting up and looking through our kitchen windows and pacing back and forth. He didn't seem to notice that he was all cut up and bleeding everywhere. He starts muttering under his breath. What happens next happens really fast and becomes a bit blurry, but the doorbell rings. It was our neighborhood patrol that my mom and called. The doorbell sent the guy into a panic. He jumps up and suddenly grabs a hold of me. He has me in a choke hold, and my mom is now screaming to please let me go. He starts looking around, all Fran that is pulling me through the dining room and living room toward our stairs. At some point the bell rings again. My mom is following, still begging to let me go. He has me at the stairs, and my mom has the choice now to go to the front door to open it or to follow him upstairs. She runs for the door. Just as he pulls me up the last of the stairs, I hear our alarms start blaring. Normally we arm it at night, so you would need to type in the code before opening a door. He pulls me into my parents' room, but as soon as we get into the room, he drops me and starts to freak out. It was apparently all the lights. He starts smashing lamps, trying to get all the lights off, screaming that they were burning him. There's a small garden off my parents' bedroom, and they have garden lights they turn on at night. He takes a chair and throws it at the glass door, trying to smash it so he can get to those lights. At least that's what it looks like. I'd crawled into a corner to get away from him at this point when he completely turns away from me to grab another chair. I make my run for it. I run down the stairs. The cops had made it into the house at this point and were at the bottom of the stairs with their guns drawn. One of them grabs my arm and pulls me out of the way once I reach the bottom and takes me outside to an ambulance and my mom. The adrenaline is coming down and it hits me. What's happened? I start shaking and can suddenly feel pain around my throat from where he'd been holding me in a choke hold. There's a lot of yelling and screaming from inside, and then maybe 10 minutes later the cops come out with a guy in handcuffs. He sees me and tries to lunge at me, which was terrifying. I had a bruised windpipe but was otherwise okay. I later learned that the guy was 20 years old and a chemistry major at one of the universities in now. Together with some friends, they made their own PCP. He never tried PCP before and had a bad reaction. They'd been driving to get some food when he first started acting paranoid and upset, and then at the drive-thru insisted they let him out, and he took off. Thinking you're being chased is a common hallucination to have when you start having a bad trip on PCP. Light sensitivity is also a common side effect in general for being high on it, but he wasn't a bad kid. He'd never been in trouble before. He was a good student and pretty much the last person you would think of to do something like this. Our house was the only one on our street that wasn't completely fenced off, and that's how he was able to reach the back in those windows. When I got older, it really hit me just how easy it is to become that kid. I had friends who wound up being chemistry majors and also DIY some of their own drugs. Thankfully, that night didn't end up worse because it definitely could have gone an entirely different direction. This story happened about 2 years ago when I was 19 and my foster sister Kira was 16. For the sake of the story, it's important to know that I was female presenting and hadn't come out as trans yet, nor was I presenting myself in an overly masculine style. At The time it was a summer before I was go to college, and I mostly lived with my mom in Sierra except for every other weekend where I'd stay with my dad, now summers where I am can get really hot and humid, so we had a habit of waiting to walk the dogs until 6 o'clock or 7 p.m. because that's when it'd be cooler but still light outside. On this particular evening my mom wasn't going to be home until late, though I don't remember the exact reason why, so it was up to me and Kyra to walk the dogs by ourselves. Unless we wanted our younger dog Samson to throw tantrums due to pent-up energy. Even though we lived in the countryside and could have walked them down our street, Kyra and I decided to drive out 20 minutes to a park instead. I don't remember why. It could have been anything from being bored walking our roads to not having to deal with blind curves and hills, whatever the reason. At around 7:30 p.m. Kyra and I harnessed our 2 dogs, packed them up in the car and drove to the park. Let me quickly explain the layout of the park so that it's easier to understand why we got nervous halfway through our walk. This park isn't very big, but it's popular because of its loop. The entire park is surrounded by a mile-long looping road with its attractions like playgrounds, ponds, and a small country hall spaced about in the inner side of the loop. The outer side is just grass, trees, and one playground at its end, thus it's common and expected to pass people walking the loop at least 2 times if you're walking in opposite directions, but not if you're walking in the same direction. Obviously, any cars on this road can drive in one direction because it's a one-way road. At first, everything about this walk was normal. I parked the car, we clipped our dogs to leashes, and we started on the loop. Every so often we'd stop so we could take a picture of our good boys, particularly of Kyra trying to wrangle Samson, who pulls like his life depends on it and weaves around 'cause he wants to smell everything. It was while I was taking one of these pictures that the first encounter happened. A man who looked to be in his 40s walked past us, walking the same direction we were, up toward the playground on the outer side of the loop. He smiled at Kyra, nodded, said hello or cute dogs or something like that, and he kept walking. I honestly didn't think anything of it. We're at a park at a time of day where it's common to walk around due to the cooler temperature, and people where I am are generally friendly. Smiling and saying hi is pretty normal. No matter who says it, we smiled back and replied, and that was that, or so we thought. This man pressed us again only 10 minutes later, directly across where we'd seen him previously, just like he did before. He smiled and said hi. This time Kyra and I looked at each other. Once he was ahead of us and shared, well, that was weird. XPRS, just 10 minutes earlier he'd passed us walking towards the playground and subsequently broke off from the loop, and he'd been walking in the same direction as us this time, though he'd cut in front of us, and he did it in the way where we had to stop to avoid running into him. He nearly touched Cairo with how close he was walking. That was already weird in of itself. The other weird part was him cutting past us in the opposite direction. The only way he could have done that was if he'd cut across the inside of the loop, since it would have been close to impossible to pass us at our certain point from the other direction. If he decided to walk the opposite way of the loop than us, it came off almost like he wanted to walk by us again. But just like before, Kyra and I brushed off this weirdness. The guy could have been enjoying a rambling stroll and doing his own thing for all we knew. Besides, we had 2 reasonably sized dogs with us who'd mess with us. Not even 5 minutes later, this same man passes us again, once again cutting so close past us that he nearly brushed shoulders with Kyra again. He smiled and said hi before walking off. This was officially the moment I decided we needed to leave. Sure, it's normal to pass a person at least 2 times walking this loop if you're going opposite directions, but doing so takes a while. You have to at least get to the parallel spot on the loop from where your paths first intersected to see each other again. Both the time between running into the guy and the location we passed each other didn't match up in a way that didn't look suspicious. Plus, I really wasn't a fan of how he cut across us the first time. He passed us like a normal person walking faster than us would, albeit a little close. The second time he cut in front of us from the opposite direction instead of walking around us to the point where we had to stop to avoid running into him. This third time he walked up behind us, then did this weird directionally slant walk to cross the street to go in the opposite direction, cutting us off again. So yeah, I told Kyra to hustle so we could get to our car and get out instead of doing a second loop, so that's what we did. When we were almost to our car, we noticed a car creeping up along behind us. We pulled to the side and stopped to let it pass, but for a second it stopped too. We figured he was getting ready to Park, so we started walking again. The car started creeping along behind us soon. After we did so, we stopped again, and the car stopped with us. This was when Kyra got nervous. We hadn't seen the mid guys since the third cut off, so we figured I'd overthought the whole thing, but here we were with this tined window car. Acting weird as hell. Was it the same guy back with his car? A different guy? We couldn't tell before anything could happen, though. Another car idled up to the one next to us, and whoever it was sped up to the expected 5 mph. We got to our car pretty fast after that and practically picked up the dogs to get them inside of it. We got in and got out of there. My mistake, however, was neglecting my rearview mirror and the well-advised rule of not driving straight home if you're worried stranger's taken too much interest in you. I was anxious, dumb, and primarily concerned with getting home where we could be safe, because home is safe, right? Nothing bad is supposed to happen to you there, right? My naive false sense of security. I think we got home around 8 something. The sun had finally disappeared behind the horizon, but it wasn't fully dark yet, just that dusty purple color the sky gets before it finally accepts that it's nighttime. My mom wasn't home yet, so we got the dogs some water, locked the doors, ate dinner, and chilled in the living room tea, talking about things that didn't really matter. It was almost 9:30 when the scariest part of this whole ordeal happened there. Kyra and I were sitting on different couches talking about something or other when we noticed the ceiling briefly light up over where Kyra was sitting. An important note here is that Kyra was sitting on a small couch with her back to her window that faces the front of the house, where I was on a couch on the opposite wall where I could see a sliver of the front porch due to our long, slightly curved driveway. It's common to see headlights stream through that window, light up the ceiling, fade, then intensify. That means someone's just come home. So when the ceiling above Kyra lit up, we thought nothing of it, assuming our mom has come back from wherever she went that night. We didn't take any notice of the light, skipping the final arc of someone pulling all the way up the driveway either. We also didn't pay any mind to how long it was taking our mom to come inside. Our mom has a bit of a habit of pulling in, then checking her phone for God knows how long before coming inside. After a couple of minutes, I noticed the small motion sensor light that our mom set up on a table on the porch light up again. I could only see a sliver of space based on my position and the curtains. I could see a smidge of the table and the rails bordering our porch, but not its stairs or anything approaching the door. Depending on how they approached it, I wasn't paying much attention either, because I assumed it was my mom. Right after the light went off, we both heard the storm door open, but we didn't hear anyone pressing the code keys of our lock or jiggle the door handle like mom usually does right away. The moment this storm door creaked open, our 2 dogs jumped up and ran to the door, barking like mad. Samson, our dumb goofball son, who is incapable of hurting a fly, but a big boy, jumps up on his hind legs and scrambles to find perches on one of the small windows in a desperate attempt to see who's outside. Immediately the storm door slammed shut and we hear heavy footsteps on the cement of our porch. Calvin started going nuts and jumped up on Kyra's couch, standing on its back instead of the cushions to look out the window. Samson ran out of the room and went to the doggy door that leads to the back porch, which has a ramp going down into a fenced-off portion of our yard. I couldn't move. I'd never understood really what it meant when people described their limbs turning to lead. Until that moment, it felt like I didn't have limbs really, like moving wasn't an option. If I moved, I might glimpse something or someone through the windows. The person could see me running around the house freaking out and decided to come after us after all. So I sat there, my mind steadily going blank as my heart sped up and my limbs refused to move. In the game of fight, flight, or freeze, I'm the free freezer. Kyra, on the other hand, is a fighter. She spins around and looks out the window but can't see anything, because besides the motion light on the porch it's too dark. So naturally she gets up, grabs a straight dog toy, which just so happens to be a tug-of-war robe with a ball on one end, and opens the door. I tell her very calmly to shut the door and stay inside. She ignored me and stepped out onto the porch. She comes back inside after not seeing anything, but to my utter disbelief, she disappears to the kitchen, comes back with a knife, and goes outside again. This time she's gone for a handful of seconds before coming back inside and slamming the door shut. Breathless, she tells me she went out a bit into the yard and saw the outline of a man by the run-down dog candle we don't use anymore. When she saw him and froze, he moved this time. She listened to me when I told her to lock the door. I managed to call her mom despite my head being empty and my limbs being lead, and she convinced me to get up, make sure all the doors were locked including the basement, and make sure the dogs were inside after our mom got home and looked around, finding nothing. We called the non-IM emergency number for the police, not wanting to bother them in case we were overreacting. 2 cops came by and walked around our yard and found nothing. We got the sense they didn't believe us, but instead saw us as 2 overexcited girls with exaggerated imaginations. Still, they humored us and told us after we told them about the park that if we think anyone might be following us or if someone's acting a bit too creepy, not to drive straight home and to check if anyone's following us. Then they left. To this day, I'm pretty sure the only people who believed someone with malicious intent came to our home in hopes of finding 2 teenage girls is Kyra and me, though whether or not whoever it was the guy from the park, we're not sure, but it's too coincidental, isn't it, that the day we have multiple encounters with this guy who goes out of his way to get close to us and a car inch long behind us, we also have an almost intruder encounter. Plus there were too many details that didn't add up to us having overly excited imaginations. We both saw headlights, the motion detector on the porch turned on, the storm door opened and stayed open until Samson jumped up and looked out the door's window. We heard footsteps. Kyra saw someone, and the docs don't run up to the door like that and bark their heads off if no one's there. I don't know if whoever it was at the house was the same guy that ran into us at the park. If it was, I don't know if the reason he cut in front of us as close as he did was to test how our dogs would react to him and them not caring at all, or the first time wagging their tails convinced him that they weren't a threat. I don't know if he was in the car that inched behind us and stopped when we did. I don't know what would have happened if Calvin didn't have a scary manic bark, or if Samson wasn't tall enough to look out the high windows on the door. I don't know much of anything. What I do know is this: if you're out and about minding your own business and a stranger is taking a lot of notice of you, following you, frequently running into you or whatever, trust your gut. Don't drive or walk straight home, meander, get to a public space, or just take your time. Pay attention to your surroundings. You never know who is watching you. This happened a few years ago when me and my brother were both still living at home. There had been a rash of break-ins in my area in the weeks leading up to it, and several of my neighbors had been broken into. My mom had been at work all day. It was around 8:30 at night, the time she normally arrived back. I was in the kitchen. My brother was in the living room on an exercise machine. I heard the familiar sound of the front door opening, then closing, and assumed my mom was back. I waited in the kitchen for the front door from the hall to open or for her to call out. Neither happened. There were no further sounds. When a minute went by, I went out to check and found no one and no car in the driveway. I assumed my mom had arrived home and then immediately left. For some reason, my brother, who also heard the sound, thought the same thing. Over the next half hour, I found myself thinking, imagine if it turns out that it wasn't her and an intruder had literally been meters away from me on the other side of the hall door. Fast forward to 9 p.m. My mom arrives home and of course it hadn't been her. The first time, all 3 of us collectively freaked out when we realized that while my brother and I had heard the door open and close, indicating someone entering the house, we hadn't heard them leave. The search of the house revealed that we were panicking over nothing. No one was standing there. Our theory is that the intruder opened the door and maybe stepped into the hallway, then heard my brother on the exercise machine and hastily ned out of there. Once they realized the house wasn't empty, we filed a police report and got a locksmith in, who told us that the front door lock that had been installed back in my grandparents' day was hilariously ineffective, and anyone with the slightest burglary experience could waltz into the house whenever they wanted. Apparently, you could almost open the thing without tools. That's how easy it was. Needless to say, we got all the exterior locks changed, bought an alarm system, and basically sealed the place up like Fort Knox. The creepiest element of this became clear only in hindsight. See, in the days immediately prior to the breaking in, there'd been a number of odd incidents. I thought I'd heard someone trying the back door handle late at night. Our dog had freaked out for no reason, and we found a cigarette butt on our front doorstep. None of us smoked. We think the house was becased. Whoever did it might have missed me and my brother's presence, and concluded that the house's only occupant was a single woman who worked long hours. To this day, I'm glad I didn't open the hall door and meet them face to face. This happened about 11 years ago when my husband and I just moved into Our current home, it was our first week in the new place I just graduated from grad school and was looking for work. Our house is small but has 2 stories with both bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs. It's also a back house which faces an our landlord and his wife live in the front house. My husband was heading out the door one morning to go to his job then. He quickly returned inside. "Did you try to remove a screen from a window downstairs?" he asked. I was confused and told him no. He then asked me to come outside, so I got dressed quickly and followed him out. The screen covering a large window downstairs was bent at a sharp angle, like someone had tried to push it up from the bottom. The freakiest thing was that there was a clear, prominent handprint on the glass, like the would-be intruder had tried to push up and open the window. Luckily, all of our downstairs windows have wooden rods wedged in the top half to physically prevent them from being opened very much. Analog security saved the day. We also found another window screen that appeared to have been cut open slightly at the corner. We called the cops, who came out and dusted the handprint, but nothing ever came of it. Smash and grab break-ins during the middle of the workday weren't uncommon in our neighborhood at the time, but what chilled me was that our would-be intruder had opted to try and break in during the middle of the night when we were both home and sound asleep. My car was in the driveway right by the broken window screen and handprint, so the person had to have known someone was at the house at the time. It was a bold move, albeit a stupid one, since they left an almost perfect handprint on the window. One day when I was younger, my mom and I visited my aunt's apartment. It's a giant looking house with a side driveway that leads around the back to a small parking lot for tenants, with the house entrances being off to the side facing away and hidden from the busy street. I don't remember how old my cousin and I were. Maybe 8 to 12 years old, with her being slightly older. It was still midday and we were all hungry, so my mom and aunt decided to go shopping and were then going to pick up pizza on the way back for us all to eat. Me and my cousin were ecstatic as we loved pizza. Our parents left and me and my cousin stay and watch TV with the volume really low while browsing on our laptop. It's probably about 25 minutes after our parents left when we start seeing the front door locks shaking. We thought our parents were back, but then we noticed something suspicious. Instead of the locks of the door quickly turning as if our parents got back, we saw that the locks were turning very slowly to unlock. We suddenly both realized it wasn't our parents, it was definitely an intruder. We both stare at the front door, silently freaked out and frozen. I always thought those horror movies where the actors stand frozen in fear like idiots were fake, but it was this moment that proved that idea wrong. As we both stood there frozen in horror, we saw the top lock finally turn all the way after what felt like half a minute. Then we start to see the bottom lock slowly start to turn. The door was probably half a second from being unlocked completely when suddenly my cousin breaks free from being frozen in fear, sprints over to the door and turns both of the locks to prevent the door from being opened. We dared not to look out the second-story window to see who was trying to get in. We were horrified and stayed quiet, waiting in the living room. We didn't say a word to each other and just sat there on the couch. It was about 15 minutes later until our parents got home, where we told them the whole ordeal and they were shocked. We don't know what would have happened if my cousin didn't sprint to lock the door, but to this day I can remember very vividly seeing the door's locks shaking rapidly and slowly turning. It was definitely very scary. One summer I worked in the box office of a theater a couple states away from where I live. The theater was mostly out-of-towners, so it owned a few houses in neighborhoods around it where everyone lived. They were pretty fun places to live. Actors constantly cheating on their spouses at home, lots of late nights, and beautiful countryside to boot. In any case, also small town living and all that comes with it. My roommate where I lived was a friend from high school who got me the job. We were in college at that point. He's gay, I'm straight. We had it sort of worked out to only hook up with people when the other person wasn't around. So one night I'm out and I come home. Him and his boyfriend are at the kitchen table, both with an odd look. I ask what's up. They look at each other before answering. Then they tell me this strange guy had led him into the house, and when they heard him they went downstairs and asked who he was. He said he lived across the street a few houses down and that his neighbor, Mrs. Something or other, who apparently lived right across the street, had seen the two of them fooling around through the bedroom window, called him on the phone and said, "Why don't you go and join those boys across the street? They look like they're having fun." At this point my roommate and his boyfriend tell the guy he has to leave after more Convincing he finally does. End of part 1. I'm pretty shaken, and so are they. It explains why they were acting so funny when I came in. I'm not one to respond to things right off the bat. I have to think in mole for a bit before the initial reaction is being scared. We all stay at the house that night. Strength and numbers. The next day, I'm at work taking down credit card numbers on the phone, handing out tickets in the evening when the crowd starts to arrive, and in the back of my mind I'm fuming. How does someone get off making a phone call like that? Why is she looking in our window? And who walks into a house and does something that stupid? I'm not scared anymore. I'm really pissed. I was having a good summer and this wasn't going to wreck it. I was going to go home, go across the street, and tell that old woman not to call any more of her friends, and if she did there was going to be trouble. So I get home. I haven't really paid much attention to the other side of the street, but I see the house. See how she looked at our window, and I march across. As I get closer, I start to notice how shabby the place is. The garage door has paint peeling off, isn't closed completely either because it's warped or off its track, or both. The front door, as I climb up these stairs, isn't doing much better. Whatever, I pound on the door, getting ready to parade. An old lady and a guy comes to the door. Short, fat, glasses, spiky hair, somewhat creepy smile. I'm a bit blindsided here. I'm expecting an elderly woman, and I get this. I'm also 19. I ask if the old woman is about. I can't remember what he says, but it ends with come in. I still have my prepared speech, and I'm determined, and I enter. After going in, I start to realize my mistake. This place is, Shaw carpeting, sofa sinking in the middle, unopened can of PS on the coffee table. I turn around, and the guy has the same creepy look on his face. I say, I think I'm in the wrong place. He says, no, I think you're in the right place. I tell him I came to see the old woman, and if she isn't here, I want to give her a message. I'm by now fully aware that she might not exist at all, and he is standing just far enough from the door that I can barely get out, but I have to have my say first, so tell her not to call any more of her creepy friends. Then no one's allowed in that house except for the people who live there and anyone we invite. If it happens again, there's going to be trouble. I tell him I should maybe add here that I'm 5 feet 6 inches and probably at that point 115 to 120 pounds at best. I try to glow at him. I stormed past him, grabbed the screen door again, trying to trade fear for anger, open it, and slam it as hard as possible behind me. Then I walk across the street, trying not to go too fast, but really just trying to get out of there as quickly as possible. When I get across the street, I ask my roommate, what did the guy look like that came in last night? He said, sure, back glasses, spiky hair. Why, this story happened 3 years ago, around the time that the pandemic started, so it was a while back, but still worthy of a post. It was early 2020, and I just got a new job in a small town near my area. While looking for a place to live, my sister offered to rent her house to me. She'd bought the house 2 years prior, but she and her husband didn't really take to it, and their commute to work was so long they moved out, and the house was uninhabited. Luckily for me, it was actually pretty close to my workplace, and my sister pretty much rented it to me for free. I just paid for the water and electricity and looked after the house. I was lived there for a solid 2 or 3 months and had already gotten used to it. One night, after coming back from work and parking my car, as I walked towards my door, I noticed something odd. There was a cigarette butt on the curb to my house. I leaned down and picked it up, thinking that it might have been mine since I'm a smoker, but after looking at the brand name, I realized that it wasn't mine and threw it away. I didn't think much of it and just shrugged it off as some throwing it at my curb. I went on with my night, and nothing unusual happened. 2 days later, I was once again walking to my house when I spotted a few more cigarette butts, this time near my porch. Needless to say, I was pissed off and thought that someone sat on my porch and smoked, but since I didn't know who it was, there was nothing I could do about it. I noticed that they were put out pretty recently, so whoever it was probably walked off. As I was approaching that night, I was watching a movie on my laptop, and it was pretty late, about 1 a.m., so I was surprised when I heard a car passing by. It's a suburban neighborhood, and it was the pandemic, so people rarely ventured out at night, but I didn't think much of it. Around half an hour later, I was surprised when I heard chattering nearby. I listened intently, but I couldn't hear what they were talking about, as their voice seemed almost muffled and quiet. By this point, I was getting a bit unnerved, so I stopped the movie and quietly got off my sofa and walked to the front door to make sure that it was locked. As I was approaching the front door, I froze. mid-step as I heard the two approaching my porch and reducing their talking to a whisper. I realized right away that whoever this was wanted to break in. I leaned against my front door and waited, expecting a loud bang against the door or the door knob to be shaken, but it was oddly quiet. I decided to walk over to my window to see if they'd walked away or changed their mind. My windows have bars from the inside out that you have to unlock so that you could move the curtains or look out the window comfortably. I slowly unlocked the bar mechanism and lifted it up. I moved the curtains and was taken aback. Leaning up against my window was a man. He was as startled as I was because he basically stuttered over his own steps. As he jumped back, he tightened his hoodie to cover his face, so all I could really see was his big blue eyes looking at me. His friend realized what was going on and right away started to kick the door in. He kicked it a solid 4 or 5 times, but the door wouldn't budge all the while I was staring at them, frozen in fear and trying to comprehend the situation. I snapped out of it and slammed the bars over my window, locking them and running upstairs to the storage room, where I pushed a table to the door and called the cops. As I listened and expected the two to come inside at any minute, I heard a loud crash and the bars from the windows being shaken aggressively. When they realized that they couldn't get in, one of them let out a long, angry scream that probably woke up half the neighborhood. By the time the cops came, they were long gone. The police couldn't find out who it was, but were more active in the neighborhood and the following weeks. Regardless, I wasn't keen on staying there, so shortly after I moved out, my sister sold the house a few months later, and as far as I know, nothing similar ever happened since. I honestly don't know what they wanted or why they were so determined to get in. But whoever it was let's not meet again. I was living in a flat share on the outskirts of a city which is known for generally being very safe. The key is needed to enter the main building, but often the door isn't shut properly and so doesn't lock. Not really a cause for concern for anyone in the building, as it's a very trusting neighborhood. It's around 2 a.m. and I'm laying in bed naked, completely spread out. Someone opens my door and enters. I figure it's one of my flatmates going to the balcony. You have to walk through my room to access it, so it's completely normal that someone might come in at this time. I've just smoked a joint and it's 2 a.m., so I opt to ignore him and pretend to be asleep. I can feel him standing there for about 2 minutes. I think maybe he's waiting for his girlfriend to join him, and maybe he stood there checking his phone. No big deal. He goes onto the balcony, takes about 2 or 3 minutes, so I figure it's definitely him. He's smoking a cigarette. He comes back in and goes back to standing in total silence, but I'm half asleep and don't really think anything of it. The next morning, my flatmate tells me that someone broke in, came into my room, went into the room of my flatmate and rummaged through his things, went into the kitchen, and upon seeing my flatmate wake up and come to see what was going on, quickly exited the building. The only thing he stole was my pair of Marshall headphones. We were all very confused as to why they only stole my headphones, as to post the money left on the table or my flatmate's multiple cameras. For example, we spoke to our neighbors, of which there were around 15 in the building, and not one of them had noticed anything out of the ordinary. They hadn't gone into any of the other apartments. We know that most of the neighbors also don't lock their doors at night, so it sounds as if they walked up 3 flights of stairs, ignored the other apartments with the sole intention of coming to ours, and given the stealth, it's unlikely that they were intoxicated and it was just a mistake. Nothing else came of it. The police said they'd keep an eye out and I had to buy a new pair of headphones, but it left me thinking about what would have happened had I opened my eyes and alerted this person standing over me. Would they have hurt me? Would it be a total stranger or someone whom I've already met? For some context, I live in a major city and currently don't do a lot of driving due to ongoing issues with my car, and the pandemic has made me turn to more delivery apps in general. So the other day around 1 p.m. I decided to order some lunch. After doing a lot of cleaning, I placed the Uber Eats order and found something to watch while I waited for the food. Within a few minutes, a driver accepted the order, and I noticed right away that the driver, Anthony, was on a bike, didn't have a profile picture or any deliveries on record. At first I wasn't alarmed at all. I was almost amused, like, oh wow, guess I'm this person's first ever customer. But then a full 30 minutes passes with no driver movement on the app, and at this point I'm thinking maybe something is glitching out or the driver is stuck. I contact support via the chat option, and they end up assigning a new driver because they couldn't reach the first one. Odd, but whatever. Now is when it starts getting a Little weirder, the new driver assigned is in the exact same spot as the original driver was there, also on a bike, also have no profile picture and have no prior deliveries as well. And this driver's name was Lori. I let another 20 minutes pass with no driver movement before I message them myself and say, hi there, are there any issues with the order? The app shows that the driver saw the message, but there was no response. All this time I'm checking to see if Uber Eats is maybe experiencing some issues, and at this point, while I'm definitely weirded out, I'm mostly just hungry, so I contact support again to request some assistance. They reassign the driver again and apologize for the inconvenience. Finally, the third driver assigned is the exact same scenario, same spot on a bike, no profile picture, no prior deliveries, only this time the name is Robert, and before I can react and go about canceling the order at this point, because I'm tired of dealing with this, he suddenly has my food and immediately messages me the following: hello, have your food, what's your phone number? I responded right away with, I'm not really comfortable giving my phone number out when you can just message me here, and he responded with, what's your number? Be there in 10, how old are you? And at this point the alarm bells are going off. I contact report immediately to have the order cancelled and get further assistance. I get connected to Uber's safety team, who informs me that the order has been cancelled, I'll be refunded. They start taking down the details of the strange interactions as I'm giving the woman on the phone the information she needs. I'm starting to calm down, thinking this was just some creep or something, and that's when I hear a man's voice at the door, Miss Joanna, I have your food, and I can't even describe the chill that went down my spine because of the way he said it. Making things even worse, the Uber safety woman on the phone with me heard him as well and says, is that him? We cancelled the order. I poked my head around the door. The main heavy door was open, the metal screen door was closed and locked, but it did allow us to see each other. I got a look at it, and when he saw me on the phone, he went from smiling to looking furious. He suddenly got right up against the door and kept asking who I was on the phone with, and at this point I started asking him to leave because he was making me uncomfortable, and he's getting more and more angry. He starts pounding on my door and grabbing the doorknob while shouting to be let in. The woman on the phone is asking if I'm okay. The man is still shouting, so basically I'm in full meltdown mode at this point and hurriedly close the heavy door to lock it. The man is becoming borderline belligerent as he kicks my door, and the woman tells me to call the police. He ended up walking away from my house about a minute after that and back up to the sidewalk, and for a moment I thought he off, so I finished my conversation with the Uber safety woman so she could submit the report. Once she submitted it, I called the police and told them what happened. They told me if he came back to call again and they would send out an officer. I did end up having to call them again and give a full report and description of the man, since he didn't end up leaving right away. He stayed in the neighborhood for almost 20 minutes. According to one of my neighbors, after she heard the yelling, she saw the man I described walk back up from my house to the sidewalk and hop into a truck with another man in the passenger seat, and they apparently just sat there staring at people walking by and being incredibly sketchy. And that's when she walked back towards my house and asked me what happened. Luckily, she was able to give myself and the cop a description of the vehicle and the other man as well. So basically, there was a very bizarre and uncomfortable experience, and I wanted to share it to maybe see if anyone has ever experienced anything like this, because honestly, I'm still pretty shaken up, and I will be avoiding delivery apps for quite a while. So strange Uber driver who asked me for personal information and then proceeded to try and break in. Please, let's not meet. I hope you enjoyed that, guys. I want to give a special mention to J Nightmares for sourcing and translating some of these stories from Japanese. Check out his channel for more stories you haven't heard before. I'll put the link to his channel in the description. If you have a scary story you would like me to read in an upcoming video, this is one way to help me guarantee variety in the stories I share. You can email me or post it to my subreddit. I'll drop the details in the video description. Thank you all for listening, and a special thanks to my patrons and channel members who now have early access to Adri videos as well as other behind-the-scenes content. Thank you to Rebecca, James, Mason Hayes, Chelsea Muffet, Lisa Apprentice, Michelle and Kevin, Amanda and Rebecca Morris, Yennefer, Jessica Leigh, Brock Ballard, Kim Thompson, Angela Reeves, Sher, AGI, Nathan Shadwick, Nicholas Johnson, Samantha Place, Cheryl Duckworth, Scoutum 405, Z Harris, Unladylike, 13 Ventura, California, Elizabeth. Mayors Alexia Tuttle Marana Rainey Will Ocean Mary Rye Jessica Copperfield Zoe D. Danielle Shaw Jane Wiggins Tara Harris Mary R. Callie Townsend M. Dessa Edmondson. Kimmy Lowe Wendy Maris Confessions of a Cleaner Megan Abrams Miss Tycoon Stephen. Sloan Christina Myway Ashley Bray Madisa Felter Danielle Tina Marie Heckman Amal. Garner Lisa Ratford Deborah Malay Connie Sue Taya Adwell Diana Johnston Vampy. Debs Jasmine Davis Erica Air Fox Mulder. Ram Beltran Tina Nick Bosie Sarah C.H. Neal. Kavanaugh Tiara Sunders Timothy Stratton Jennifer Jenkins Lloyd R. Marble Duna Michael O.M. Ollie Marissa Kuro Ember Hops King Slim Justin Beast. Gillespie Joy Dana J. Blee Anna Stephanie. McLaren Lumine Kami Skin Crawler Adara. Bella Place 2006 Michelle Welchman Dana B. Lisa McDonald Clar Scott Madison C. Sting Jennifer J. Ashley Liliat Lee T. Wyatt Gina Laura J.K. 6 Venzio Donna Joey. Big GSC Tanya Spaghetti Wello King Matthew October Gypsy Lisa Ollie Thomas. Build With Me Letitia France Debs Insomnic Cats Stephanie Summer. Rebecca Tyara This Bad Kitty Your Paypiece Dilly Laney Tripping Balls Through. History Samantha Erica Alyssa Tracy. Killian's Place April James Arbor Jen Joy. Handout Pegasus Genesis Karen Kitu V. Berry. LJ Fiona Exoix Scott I Like Booty Monica. Level A Chris and Donna Holly Spry Kimber Jasmine Centik Heather Haven. Kitty Cat Luna 2 ADHD Aurora Janice. Cinderella Baby Borderline Betty Lady Draco Erica Nicole Snowball Rena Melanie. The Honeybee 987 Pretty Girl 21B Ryan Brooke Wendy. CFTYK Tina Dina Vampy Devs Patricia. Amber Krista Brenda Absent Alice Chrissy. K Spiders Web H Lala Andrea Sue Monique. Shah Gorman Emma Lisa Sigma Cube X Greg. Chelsea Amanda Jane Sam Z Tay Sarah C. Austin Tegan Lil Smart Jenny Gabrielle. Fire 5 Sarah P. James Gargano Gemma Allo. Monica Level A and Alex I hope you're doing well guys. I'll see you all on the next one.